Hey everybody, let's see how many people we got here. We're getting a few in. Okay, cool. Well, welcome to the, first ever seminar from the Fish with JD headquarters. And we're gonna just do a Ask JD type session here, just pretty chill, pretty casual, because well, the fact is it's been raining and snowing. And if you're on the West Coast, there is absolutely nowhere to fish really right now. If you're up north, you're covered in snow. If you're down here, you're raging and looking at high water going by. So the only thing to do is talk steelhead, right? So we are going to get to a bunch of questions, and there's a little comments box down there where you can start asking questions too. And I need to get my computer set up so I can see that better. But in the meantime, I have some questions that people have already asked, and I'm going to read those to you, and hopefully we'll get to those, and then you guys can start throwing in your questions on the bottom here. And so, let's see, what do we got here? So this is from Jess. JD, I just got into float fishing. I've been reading a lot about bobber fishing for steelhead, but am a bit overwhelmed. Any way you can help me start? Can you help? Well, I can. That's good. I'm glad you asked. So bobber fishing can be very confusing, especially to the beginner, but there's a simple way to do it. I always recommend start with a good old fill fixed float, and these are simple, and all you need is a float, a marabou jig in your business. Now, I'll get into this in a sec, but quick story on this. When jig fishing first came out, floating jig fishing, or at least when I first became aware of it, it was about here's some other ones here. 1989 or so, something like that. And Nick Amato, who is the editor of Salmon Trout Steelheader, was telling me all about this, and he was writing all these articles about it. And I was like, wow, okay, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm hearing jig and I'm hearing bobber, and I'm thinking bluegill, right? You know, just some sort of, well, I mean, you look at these jigs, they kind of look like just a little kind of advanced crappie jig. And so I couldn't wrap my head around that as far as steelhead fishing goes. So I went up there and went fishing with them, and I learned a lot. The first day we went out, we were on some, God, I don't remember what it was, some tributary to the Columbia. I was pretty lost, but we went out fishing with jigs and bobbers. And the first time I ever did it, we hooked, I don't know, I lost count at 19 or something between the two of us. And they were big fish, really big fish, like all those, they call them B runs, those fish that are heading up to the upper end of the Columbia system, the Clearwater, and up that way, Salmon River. And these fish were all like 12, 15, 18 pounds, and they're all eating this stupid little thing, and I couldn't really get my head around it. Well, eventually I did it a lot more after that, obviously, and it's nothing new anymore, but I think it's still the best way to start because it's so simple. You need a bobber and literally a jig. Well, you want a few, of course, if you get snagged up. And Nick actually showed me that day. He just packs all this stuff into a Ziploc bag. You throw it in your pocket and you go fishing. So what could be more simple than that? So that's really pretty cool. The way you rig this up, and I see this one's missing the bottom end, but you just take your line. There's a little rubber, let's see, there's a camera, little rubber grommet right there. Okay. Slide your main line through that. And this one has normally one on the bottom here too, and it fell off, I guess, somewhere when I was bringing it in. But you just slide that, once your line's through it, back onto the top like that. And then your line would run down this thing, and then there'd be another little rubber grommet there that it'd run through. And then that fixes your line or your bobber to the line, and then you can just grab it and slide it up or down to adjust your depth. You don't need any bobber stops or any of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a cool way. Now, as far as jigs go, there's a million companies now. Used to be that Bo Mac was probably the main one that made them. But if you look online, there's a bazillion of these guys out there these days. And 1/8 size is typically what I do. Sometimes I'll go up a little bit to 3/8 and 1/4, but 1/8 is kind of the all-around steelhead size that I use. And then you want to make sure you match your bobber size, the amount of weight this thing will hold, to your jig, because If you have too much weight, it obviously causes your bobber to go under. And if you don't have enough weight, the bobber just kind of sits there floating and it's on its side. It's not really doing what it's supposed to do. So you want that thing riding. Let's see if I can make this happen. Riding like that, okay? Straight up and down. And you just adjust this to where you want to be. Typically, when you're bobber fishing, you want your gear to be within a foot or two of the bottom so the fish can come up to it and see it. They don't look down very well. They look up better. So it's better to air a little bit higher. And you can tell what's going on underwater with these floats pretty well. So if your bobber's riding straight up and down like this, floating down the river, all is good. Now, if the current's, say, going this way here, so your bobber's like this is good, okay? If you get your bobber doing this a little bit, obviously the bobber is being slowed down because the sinker is now dragging on the bottom. So if you get a little downstream angle, you've got some, especially with a little bit of tap going on, you've got a little drag. Now, if it's doing this going downstream, there could be some boil or some weird current that's pushing the gear up. And what's happening is that jig is not down below, straight down. And you want it pretty much straight up and down. So that's the best way to get into bobber fishing. I would use about it depends on where you're fishing, of course, but you want braided line. And with these little fill floats, this is a Fill Turbo Master. And let's see, there's a label right there. You're gonna see if you can see that. And this is rated for 1/8 ounce. A lot of bobbers are rated in grams, so you might have to use your iPhone to do a little conversion on that so you can see which one's the right one for your jig. So just match your jig size to your bobber. And then we're gonna go with some braided line. I like to use a braid for the first part because it floats. Now the other thing is I want to use a brightly colored braid so I can see it. I don't know if you can see those rods. You can't really tell the line on them, but those have brightly colored braid on it. And it just helps you see your line when you're fishing. And then you put about a 10-foot leader on, clear leader. You don't want to run your braid right to your bobber. And then as far as jig colors go, again, we'll keep it simple. You could fish all year with these three guys here. You've got a dark pink and black. You've got just straight hot pink. And then this is a good winter color, this pink and white. And you can get away with those pretty much year round. Now, as the water gets lower and clearer, the old Nightmare jig works really well. And these things are so goofy, man. I don't know what the deal is. They're as you can see, it's a looks kind of red on camera, but it's actually kind of pink, but it's actually red, white, and black. And it looks like nothing as far as I can tell. I mean, that's just a little. There's hardly any tail on that thing, and they go crazy for it, especially in low, clear water. I don't know if it looks like anything in particular. Nothing I've ever seen natural in the water, but for some reason that little jig is deadly. So if you're getting into this jig and bobber fishing, definitely keep some of those on hand. Then the other way you can go, you can use the same fill float and run this is a Mad River worm jig, 1/8 ounce again. And it's just a jig head with a plastic worm. And usually 3.5 to 4.5 inch size worm to start with. You can go bigger than that as you kind of get into it. And same deal with colors. Like here's the first one I showed you, just the straight pink. That's a good one. If the water's a little murkier, you might throw the hot pink with a chartreuse tail on it. And then here's that Nightmare again in the worm form. This guy's red, black tail, and white head. And then this one works good too. It looks like a bass worm, which it basically is. But the black with the chartreuse tail works kind of in all conditions. So that is a quick but long-winded answer on how to get started in bobber fishing. And the main concept that you should probably remember, Jess, and everybody else who's getting into it, is you want the float to be straight up and down. So you don't want a bunch of line on the water between your tip and your float, because if your rod tip's up here, let's see, where's the bobber? There it is. And if this is drifting along and you've got a big loop in your line on the surface of the water between your float and your rod tip, it's gonna drag this thing too fast downstream and you're gonna get a funky drift. So you're gonna want to lift that line off the water, keep everything straight, and if it starts to do that again. Just keep lifting it up, just like fly fishing, mending. And then when that thing goes down, set the hook. No, that's what you think, right? And it's hard not to do that. I mean, it really is. You see the bobber go down, and it's just a visceral, let's set the hook. But what you want to do is, when that thing goes down, reel down to your float to get that slack line out of the water. Because a lot of times if you just set the hook, you've got some loose line in there. Even if you've been mending properly the whole time, you're probably got more line in the water than you think. So if that goes down and you jerk, all you do is kind of straighten out the line. You're not putting a lot of hook set power into the fish's mouth. So bobber goes down, just remember the mantra, reel till you feel. So you reel down and then set the hook, and you'll miss a lot fewer fish that way. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question. The next one comes from Dan, and hello Dan, hopefully you're out there. Trolling for steelhead. I've never fished for steelheads, so can you troll for them? If yes, can you recommend a location? Well, we don't do much steelhead trolling here at all in California. In fact, I mean, we back troll down the rivers and all that, but we don't do any trolling here. Now, they do in the tributaries of the Columbia River, like the John Day, the Lower John Day, the Deschutes, some of those rivers where there's a dam on the Columbia and it backs those tributary streams up into basically lakes. The lower end of these tributaries coming in are lakes, and guys will troll big magworts around in there for them. And that's kind of a specialized fishery. Drano Lake's another one. They just kind of troll around. It's like lake trolling for big trout. And there's an interesting method they do too. And I'm going to get off on a tangent here, but they fish slip floats, the kind of float that the line goes through the bobber, and then you have a bobber stop up here, and they'll set them for like, I don't know, 20 feet deep or something like that. And below it, they hang a little shrimp. With their electric motors, they just troll along. It must look really goofy under there like that, but they catch a bunch of fish. I haven't done it. I've seen them do that. Not really my thing. So I guess the short version is yes, we do, or people do troll for steelhead. I don't do it much, and it's more of a Washington, Oregon thing. So okay, now we've got Phil, who asks about bumpers versus leaders. He says, I have read many posts and comments in various forums about getting a bumper and or leader between the main line and the terminal gear. Yes. That's a good idea. What is the difference between a bumper and a leader? I use 30-pound braid on my main line, which allows me to fish for bigger fish like Chinook here in Washington State. So leader and a bumper is the same thing, Phil. When you're using braid, and I use braid a lot for steelhead, especially for float fishing like I was just talking about, but for plug fishing, for drift fishing, I do a lot of braid fishing. But I always put a leader in between. And that's because, well, two things really. One is you just don't want the fish to see the braid. Like a lot of times braid is bright color. So if you tie a bright braid right down to your lure, fish are going to see it. And a lot of times braid is really hard to break off too if you get snagged up on something. So I like to have a lighter leader in between. And then he also asked about, same guy, Phil. He said, we just have over 12 inches of snow here in Southwest Washington, which affects a lot of the tributaries of the Columbia. I'm curious to understand how snowmelt affects water and fishing quality. Put another way, how many days should I wait for rivers to clear up to chase steelies? Okay, well, there's no simple answer to that, obviously. Every river is going to clear up differently. And what I would suggest to you is you wait until the river's dropping. First thing is you got to wait till the water's starting to come down after a big flood. Steelhead don't bite very well in a rising river. I mean, you can catch them, but typically you want that stuff coming down. Now, you want it also not raging and brown either. I usually like to wait till it gets out of the trees, dropping down, and that could be a day, a week. I mean, it just really depends on what river you're fishing. So we want that thing to be coming down and starting to turn that nice emerald green color, and that's when you're going to start catching your steelies. If you are impatient, the thing to remember is the upper end of a river is going to clear faster than the lower end. So up here at the top is where you're going to want to fish right after the rain. And then that'll eventually get too low and clear. Then you want to keep moving downstream because that big high water and all the sediment kind of pushes downstream like that slowly over time. So start high, then work your way downstream. So hopefully that answers that. I'm sorry if I can't give you exact, I don't know which river you're on. So, okay, from Ken. Is there any steelhead fishing in the main Sacramento River? I asked because I read an article that stated Coleman Hatchery recently released 600,000 steelhead smolts. Yes, there are steelhead in the Sacramento River, and it's not really that spectacular, especially the last few years because of the drought. So I would say yes, but kind of no. It's not really spectacular. It was really good about 20 years ago, and it's kind of just been doing the classic decline like so many things around here. Now, that being said, like in the fall, we catch some Chinook fishing and some nice ones. I mean, sac steelhead typically are going to be, you know, these guys, 4 or 5 pounds. I can't get my, there we go. And I've caught them up to about 8 or 10. And those are really cool fish. I wish we had more of those, but there just aren't as many. So most of your sac steelhead fishing is in the fall, August through November, September, something like that. And there's a few winter fish, but like right now the river's raging. You never have a chance at them anyway. So, all right. What else do we have here? Bait or lure first? This comes from Bushy. Hello, Bushy, if you're out there. When you first fish an untouched hole, do you start with lures and follow with bait, or vice versa? Good question. So as far as that goes, I mean, that's a case-by-case basis. Do you throw a lure through there or bait through there? My general concept on that is the lure is going to get the fish, the more aggressive ones. You pick off the dumb ones first. You can always come back with bait because steelhead love eggs. I mean, you could also argue why even bother with the lure if they like it so much. So I usually don't fish bait and lures through a hole on the same spot. I mean, sometimes, but I would definitely throw the lure first. Unless it's super low and clear, you may risk the chance of spooking a fish that might otherwise have bitten your egg. So, you know, it's one of those things where you just kind of case-by-case basis, but I would just err on the side of run the bait through there and not mess with the lure. But there are times when lure, especially in the fall, when spoons, like little Cleos and BC Steels and the new P-line spoons, all those kind of things, fish really well in the fall when the water's a little warmer. In the wintertime, when it's cold, I'm going to stick with bait. Fish seem to just react to bait way better. Now, okay, our next question comes from Frank. And he asks, I fish for steelhead and salmon. Is there any difference to fish preference for using either row for each species? Now, I'm not totally sure. I think what he's asking there is, do salmon eggs outfish steelhead eggs or vice versa? And, you know, some people get really crazy about this. I'm much more mellow. I figure a good egg's a good egg. Some people say that, oh, you have to fish for salmon or steelhead in the river with the eggs from that same river. So if you're going to fish the, you know, the cowlets or something, you have to use eggs that you caught previously on the cowlets. Otherwise, those fish won't bite that. Well, I'm here to tell you that's going to be a little bit of hogwash, but I mean, we're giving fish too much credit, right? I mean, a steelhead or a salmon smells a good bait, you know, he's going to eat it. I don't think he really sniffs it out and goes, oh, no. I'm a feather river fish. I can't eat Columbia River eggs now. So as far as getting back to Frank's question here, salmon eggs versus steelhead eggs, generally steelhead eggs are going to be smaller. So those tend to make a little nicer cluster of bait if you're drift fishing for steelhead. I don't think salmon or steelhead really particularly care one way or other. I mean, again, if you have good fresh bait, you take care of it. And by taking care of it, that's kind of the real huge thing, is when you catch a fish, make sure you bleed the fish immediately if it's a hen. And then you want to get those eggs on ice as quickly as you can and not touching water. So throw them in a Ziploc, throw them in a cooler. And if you can't cure them right away, which most of us can't because, you know, you're catching them out on the river. So, get the eggs on ice, get them home, and then cure them there as fast as you can. Don't let them sit in the fridge. You know, sometimes you get lazy and get home from fishing and go, yeah, I think I'll just cure those tomorrow. I mean, it's okay, but the membrane of the egg is much tougher first day. You'll notice if you pull a bag of eggs out of the fridge a few days later, it's starting to get gooey and stuff in there, and I don't know, I don't think they cure up as well. So I will say, as far as steelhead fishing, it goes, I don't know, I would say steelhead eggs versus salmon eggs. When you're targeting steelhead, I would go with a non-sulfite type of egg. Now you can go back and forth with this, and I've caught fish on both, but as a general rule, salmon like a sulfite cured egg, like your standard pro cure or whatever that, you know, pot skis, those kind of cures, Atlas Mikes, mostly are sulfite based. And steelhead will eat those, but I've seen it. Like one time we're on the Trinity River and we're just fishing off the bank as kids, and we're seeing this guy just rope the fish, and we're kind of floundering around. So we go and talk to him, and we're like, you know, 20 years old or something, 15, I don't remember, but we were young. And he goes, we're like, how are you catching all these steelhead? We can't catch steelhead. And, you know, you're using roe, we're using roe. And he goes, what kind of roe are you using? We said, oh, you know, Procure or whatever it was. And he goes, well, you're using sulfite bait, and steelhead don't like sulfite bait as much. And so he gave us some borax bait that's not sulfited up, and we started catching steelhead. And it was amazing. There were so many fish in the river at that point that day. You could almost go cast for cast, like call your shot. Okay, I'm going to put on some sulfite bait and catch a steelhead. Woo. I mean, a salmon, sorry. And then throw out the borax bait and catch a steelhead. So I've always kept that in mind, and it seems to hold true. Again, you can cross over. Salmon will eat borax eggs. Steelhead will eat sulfited eggs. But in general, steelhead like it a little sweeter, salmon like it a little saltier. And so that's kind of just a little rule of thumb. I mean, again, there's no super hard and fast rules to anything in this fishing stuff. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. So that, I guess, hopefully answers your question. Now we have a question from our, hang on, I got a little note from our IT tech guy here. Okay, you guys can, if you haven't found it, for those of you who've signed up or come on since we started, you can put your name or your question down in the chat box there. And I have seemed to have lost my chat box. Where did my chat box go? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So I have a few more questions that people wrote in before we started, and then we'll get to those questions you guys have live here. Okay, so that was a row preference. So Slayer, which I assume isn't your real name, Slayer, or maybe you're from the band. Launch and takeout locations. I think what would help us newbie drift boaters the most would be a current map with first and foremost put in and takeout points of our nearby rivers, and then known fishy spots and danger areas. That would help greatly. Thanks. Okay, so that would be hard because, you know, I don't know where you are, and there's a million rivers. But if you go to AmatoBooks.com, Amato, A-M-A-T-O, books.com, they're the guys that publish Salmon Trout Steelhead magazine, which I write for. But they have a huge library of fishing books, and one of the most popular series is these river map books. And they have river map books for Oregon. They have, let me see here. I think I can show you. Maybe not. I was going to show you one of these, but I'm not that technically savvy, so we'll figure that out. But you can go to Amato Books, and they have these really cool river map books that have all the put-ins, the takeouts, just all the stuff you were asking for. They have them from Oregon, Washington, California, Idaho, Montana, maybe. And then I think they've got some Alaska and Great Lakes stuff too. I haven't checked lately, but that would be my best suggestion to you, is just go and check that out. And then when you do that, do know that some of these books are not always, you know, super updated. I think most of those books have been written in the last several years, but every winter a river can change, especially you get ones on the coast where they're not subjected to reservoir controls and trees can wash out. I mean, I was talking to my buddy on the Hoh River yesterday, and he said that his first trip down it, and since the last rain, which was just a few days ago, I guess, and I mean, there was trees everywhere. He said he had to drag his boat around, all kinds of stuff, and then the next day it'll be completely different. So don't use those books as completely the gospel, but as a good place to start, because obviously things change and accesses may or get private or opened, or, you know, all kinds of stuff. So I would check those books out. They're really cool. just don't use them as 100%. You know, the little thing that says on your phone, this is not to be used for navigation, you know, so or a navigational aid or whatever it says. So just you know, take them with a little bit of a grain of salt, just so you know, you don't get into trouble on something. Okay, here's another one from Gary, which is, what's the best side gliding leader length? So side gliding is a form of side drifting that we do out of the drift boat or the power boat. And he's just asking about leader length. And there's no, again, all this stuff is it's not hard and fast. So as far as the side drifting leader goes, I'm going to make mine from 3 to 5 feet long. 3 feet long, so shorter in darker off-color water, because you don't need that separation between the bait and the sinker that you do when the water's clear. And then as you get more water clarity, you just stretch that sucker out. And, you know, sometimes I'm going about 5 feet is about the max, because typically we're side drifting, at least out of the drift boat with clients, we're side drifting with spinning rods. And so I don't want to go super long on the leader just because it's harder to cast. So the basic rule of thumb with all steelhead drift fishing really is you can go shorter when you have off-colored water, and then just as the water color clears, you want to just separate that lure from the sinker a little bit. Okay. This one's funny. Do I stink? This comes from Rick. And I don't know, Rick, do you? I've been steelhead fishing with 2 very respected guides on the Bogoshiel and Wynoochee rivers during the apex of steelhead season. Much to the guide's disappointment, I never got so much as a bite. Others in the boat hooked up and caught fish. One of the guides told me that I wasn't out of luck, but he thought I stunk. Well, that's very nice. I'm paying you to tell me that I stink. Thank you. Yeah, there goes your tip, pal. There was a scientific name for the condition which I have forgotten. He suggested I wear a white pair of plastic gloves. What is the name of this condition? Yeah, you know, to be honest with you, I have no idea. I would think that maybe it's not so much that you stink. I mean, luckily I can't smell you, but it might just be that what you have on your hands stink. And I don't know you as far as your habits, but maybe before you go fishing, I'm just throwing something out here. Maybe before you go fishing every day, little aqua velva on your hands, you know, splash it on there, and then you have that on your hands, and everything you touch smells like aqua velva. Or you love flaming hot Cheetos, for example. I mean, I don't know if steelhead are opposed to flaming hot Cheetos, but I sort of just think maybe they wouldn't be. But so maybe you just ate a big bag of flaming hot Cheetos on every steelhead trip. Well, it was only 2 trips, so it's a small sample size. But something like that, or diesel fuel, chewing tobacco. Fish aren't really hot on chewing tobacco. Cigarettes, that's been fairly proven that cigarettes are sort of a fish turnoff. So maybe it's one of these things. Before you go seek medical attention for stinking, you might just check to think back on, is there anything you do every time you go fishing beforehand? I don't know, wash your hand with your wife's, you know, foo-foo flowery soap. I mean, I don't know. I think the rubber gloves thing is a good idea. There's also some, if you go to the tackle stores, there's products they make that are, you know, little hand soap stuff that get scent off of you, so you kind of have neutral scent. So I would try that before you go get any anti-stink surgery or something. I don't know. I don't know. That's interesting. If anybody out there has any info on that, feel free to chime in on it. Now, I think that's what we, oh no, we got a couple more here. Sorry, before we get to you guys out there. Got the troll for steelhead. Oh, steelhead plugs. This is Shane. Shane is asking about steelhead plugs. He's got a drift boat, and is it best to use single or treble? Well, you know, that's a question that I have battled with myself a lot. Salmon, steelhead fishing, treble hooks. It's kind of, here's what happens to me, right? So I'll overthink it. And I'll say, okay, I'm sick of these treble hooks. for some reason they don't seem like they're grabbing. So I'm gonna switch all my plugs out to salmon or to single hooks, and then I go out and I fish single hooks and I miss like 5 fish in a row or something, and I go crazy and I pull all those off. And then I go back and put trebles on, and then I'll miss like 5 bites in a row on that, and then you're just like, okay, I'm going back to singles. And I've done that so many times. And I think the simple answer is they both work, and they both don't work. I think you could argue that with trebles, especially 2 of them, a fish bites your lure, and you got these 3 hooks. Let's see, I got a plug here. So bites these 3 lure or these 3 hooks or 6 hooks, and on some cases like that, like if you grab it with your hand, you get all of them every time, right? You know, anytime you're dealing with it, or the net, every single hook. It's amazing how a steelhead can bite down on this thing with singles or trebles and not get hooked. Little side note on that. So I went on this fishing trip in Washington up on the Olympic Peninsula years and years ago. And the guide said, here, check my hooks. I said, okay. He goes, oh, what am I looking for? He goes, just make sure they're sharp. And I played around with them. I'm like, oh, yeah, those are real sharp. He goes, okay, I just wanted to let you know that before. I'm like, no, what? And he goes, so when you get this crazy takedown that rips the rod almost out of your hands and burns 100 yards of line off the reel and the fish comes off, I don't want you blaming me for the fact that my hooks weren't sharp. And I went, okay. And sure enough, we got these crazy, these, I mean, unbelievable. Those are just huge, giant native fish up there on the coast. And they would just smack those plugs and be gone, you know, in a blink of an eye. And just like, I could see he'd obviously had clients in the past go, dude, what's up with your hooks? And so that was part of his deal, was showing people ahead of time. But I was like, okay, yeah, I see. So getting back to single versus treble, again, I've done it all, and I'll show you a few variations on what I do. So for a lot of years, I would rig the single hook off the belly. Now each plug has a little different weight wiggles and different weight balance, so you got to play with that. You want to make sure it clears the back end so they have something to bite. But I did that a lot because I felt like with one single hook, I could just get that hook cornered right in or pinned right in the corner of the jaw. Once it's there, it doesn't come out. Whereas with trebles, sometimes I think all those points kind of fight each other, trying to gain purchase. I mean, you got pressure going different ways. Whereas with a single hook, you got this thing here, and there's nothing impeding it going in. Now, the flip side is a fish bites it, and that thing lays sideways and goes, you know, right out of his mouth. So I don't know. It's confusing sometimes. I've gone with I don't think I have one here, but 2 singles, and that seems to work. What I've also been messing with is, as far as singles go, I got all tangled up here. You can see this guy's a nice war-torn veteran. That's another little insider tip. If you get into a guide boat or somebody's boat that's taking you fishing, and they say, which plug do you want, the shiny one or the beat up one? Always take the beat up one. It's not beat up because he's been dragging it behind his truck. Those are teeth marks. Not so many teeth marks on this one. This one's fresh out of the pack. So it's interesting how with plugs, salmon and steelhead, you can put 2 identical ones in. These are the same size here. Put 2 in, and 1 out of 5, 10, 20, it's hard to say because everything's different. There must be something in these things that, I don't know, quality control. I don't think it's that. I don't know. There's something where one plug will just kill fish, and the other one that looks just like it will not touch a fish. And sometimes you put them in the water and one just spins or runs weird, and you're like, okay, throw that one out or give it your buddy. And then other times it looks fine to your eye, but you'll notice after time that one is not getting bit at all. And then, you know, another one starts looking like this guy, and you go, okay, well, this one's a swimmer. It's a winner. And then as far as another rigging style goes, whoops. So, okay, this guy, I went with a single hook on the back. And again, each plug you got to kind of mess around, because if you tweak it too much, it'll mess with the action. So what I do a lot of times is I take, you can see this was the original treble hook, and I just cut all the bend is off, just so we just basically have nothing but the original shank. Okay, and I just did that to keep the weight balance, kind of trying to keep what the designers originally had thought with. I thought, you know, if you just, some of these plugs, if you put just a hook on the back, which works really well on some, and others, because you don't have the weight there anymore, they get all goofy. So sometimes I'll just put a weight on the back end, or weight up there to counterbalance the front. And then here, you notice this is another thing. I'll show you. This is what I do with all my plugs, basically down salmon or steelhead. See, there's double split ring right there. And you do this with trebles or singles. And I'm going to put, you know, you got the stock split ring that comes between the hook and the lure. And then I add another one. And maybe it's easier. I got a salmon plug here. Might be easier to see just because it's bigger. But you can see I've got 2 split rings on there. And what that does is when a fish bites and he's fighting next to the boat and starts doing that twisty, turny stuff, he can use that leverage to rip that hook out of his mouth. Well, with this on here, you've got almost a complete 360. You really do. You have complete rotation ability there. So when a fish is fighting and thrashing, I'll do it slow, this thing's able to rotate, and he's not able to use that pressure against you so much. So anyway, I wouldn't use necessarily this big a plug for steelhead, although I've caught plenty on salmon plugs. But that double split ring on any of your rigging is a good idea. And then another system I like is take the middle or the belly hook off and run a treble off the back. This last one we had a single, and this one, God, stop wiggling there, guys. Okay, so we got a single on the back here, and I left the shank of the hook on that one. This one, I left just the original split ring, just trying to keep some sort of weight on there. And that seems to work too, because I think what happens here is the fish bites, there's nothing to stop him from getting, you know, kind of tangled up, and then it just slides and gets him perfectly in the corner. Where if they're in the top of the jar or something, they don't always stay. You get them right there in that side pocket in the lip, and that fish is going to stay on there. Okay, so we're getting some more questions here from you guys live. Let's see what we got here. RJ says, will there be a recording to download later? Yes, we'll have that. Oh, we already got that. Okay. How does one plunk for winter steelhead? What is the setup? That comes from Phil in Washington. Plunking is probably a very apropos topic right now because we have so much high water. And there's actually, I have right now, good timing, I have on my website, if you go to fishwithjd.com, which is right there, just add a .com on the end of that. If you scroll down a couple articles, I have a whole plunking diagram, but plunking is basically, it's glorified catfishing is what it is. You're taking it, when we plunk, let me back up a little bit. Plunking is a high water technique. So once the river, we got the flood, the water comes up, it just starts cresting and starting to come down. It's still high, it's still probably in the trees, but it's starting to turn from brown to green. That's when we start plunking. And it's normally, you know, we're throwing out with bobbers or drift gear and bouncing the bottom and having our stuff move along. With plunking, we just want our rig to sit there anchored on the bottom, not moving. And what's happening here when plunking, high water actually looks really intimidating when you look at a river and it's just completely out of its mind, up in the trees, huge. But what that does really is eliminate a lot of the places you have to fish. These fish are not going to be out in the center. I always think of it as, imagine if you're walking down like a New York City street, the kind with, you know, big buildings on both sides like this, and you don't walk at the wind. Say the wind's howling in your face. You're not going to walk straight down the yellow line of the street. You're going to go tuck into one of these sides where the buildings are to get some windbreak. And that's the same thing with steelhead are doing. They go to the edges so you can eliminate 99% of the river when the water's high and actually fish real close. A lot of times if you're casting 20 feet, you've casted too far. So what you're looking for is inside corners of bends. Those fish tend to go on the shallow side of the river as they're migrating up in high water. They don't want those outsides because there's more current out there. So they'll take the inside corners of the bends and usually be traveling in nothing more than 3 or 4 feet. And so what we want to do is take a heavy weight, plunk it out there, anchor it in that zone, and then behind it we'll have like a spinning glow. And again, you can look on the website right now. I have a diagram for this, so that'd probably be easier than me trying to explain it. But again, it's about, I don't know, 2 or 3 stories down, but it'll show you everything about this. But this is kind of the Cliff Notes version. So big heavy sinker, 3-way swivel or a slider. So we'll have a dropper and then a leader back to here. And I'll put a spinning glow, spinning and flashing cheater. And some guys just run that just like that. And all that does is sit there in the water in that travel lane and spin. And you just wait for a fish to come up to you. I like to add some bait, some roe or some shrimp to it just to give them a little more something to key in on. And the idea is just plopping this stuff into the travel lane where they don't really have a choice but seeing it. You know, you can try to narrow everything down as far as, you know, forget the main part of the river because it's out. It's going a million miles an hour. They're not there. They're going to be on those edges again. And you can kind of you almost have a captive audience in a way when fish are migrating through to get them in those zones. And then the glorified catfishing part is, again, you're just anchored on the bottom. And if you're getting too much, if you don't have enough weight, you'll get a lot of drift. You don't want any drift. So reel in, put a heavier weight on, get it out there and make it sit there on the bottom so it doesn't drift. It might drift a couple feet until it finds, you know, gets into a little lane and stops, but you don't want it bouncing. And then check your line a lot because when a river's dropping, there's going to be stuff on your line and there's all kinds, even if you can't see it, there's little twigs and debris and leaf pieces coming down. So you always want to reel in every few minutes and just clean all that stuff off your line. And then you throw back out, you put the rod in a fork stick or a, you know, these guys have real fancy sand spikes and holders. And plunking's kind of cool because you put a bell on there and then you start barbecuing and you listen to the ball game and back your truck right up to the river and sit in the tailgate or pulling forward if it's cold and keep the engine running and have some hot chocolate and go plunking. So, okay, hopefully that, you know, again, go to the website. That'll clear that up a little more. Let's see, what else do we have here on questions? We have, thanks for answering my question. Okay. Are there any rivers in California? This comes from Anonymous 0277. Are there any rivers in California where you can target 3-salt hatchery fish? 3-salt fish would be a fish that spent 3 years in the ocean, and that means it's going to be bigger. Well, not really effectively, I guess would be my answer. The Smith River is going to be your best bet for big hatchery fish. And there's going to be a lot of wild fish in there too. And I assume if you're targeting hatchery fish, you want to take some home. And I used to not be at all into killing steelhead, and I still don't kill many at all. But I kind of got over myself because I'm completely opposed to killing any wild steelhead anywhere. I mean, that just to me is sacrilege. But a hatchery steelhead, I think what changed my deal for me was a biologist came up to me in Oregon and he said, "Why'd you let that thing go?" It was a beautiful chrome buck, you know. And I said, "I don't know. I just don't like to kill steelhead, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "Look, man, we raise those to be harvested. That's what we do. We'd actually prefer them not to be in here. We don't want that many in here spawning. We want enough to get our hatchery numbers up, but we don't want you to leave these things in there spawning with the wild fish. So go ahead and please take some." So I thought that was cool. So, and steelhead, you know, I'm not a huge red meat guy unless it's maguro. I like tuna. I like salmon and steelhead, but it's not my favorite. But I think steelhead does taste good. So that was sort of a long-winded answer. Yes, go to the Smith. I think that's your best shot for a 3-salt hatchery fish in California. Otherwise, go to a little above the border and check out the North and South Umpqua. The South Umpqua in particular has some giants in it. Okay, next question. Thanks for that question. Anonymous 0227. Okay, from Chris. Where can you get eggs if you don't have your own? Good question. That's a tough one because I'm sure you've been to like a Walmart or something and seen those clam pack. Oh, just like we saw some the other day that were Potskis or something, and they were cured roe, and it was just like black. It's like smashed roe casserole or something. That stuff, just stay away from it. And I'm not harping on Potskis there. Just any of those prepackaged ones are pretty gnarly. I have had people tell me, and I haven't had to buy eggs, luckily, knock on wood, but Sunrise Bait Co., and you can look them up. You can Google them. They're out of Oregon somewhere, but it's sunrisebaitco.com maybe. They make a pretty good product. And then I think I used to buy his cure, Scott Ammerman, who's an Oregon guide up there in Tillamook. I think he makes eggs too, and it's I don't know his website. I'm not 100% positive he still does it, but I've checked that because in fact, I have used his eggs. I take that back. A buddy of mine brought some, so I know he's been doing it recently. He'll sell jars of it. Now, cured roe is not cheap, but if you got none, you got none. Having said that, I will argue that you can catch just about as many fish drifting a yarn ball. So don't feel too bad if you don't have eggs. Steelhead aren't super rocket scientists. If you get the right presentation and get a yarn ball in front of them, you can put a little scent on it. I wouldn't feel like you're losing out too bad on that. So hopefully that helps you out, Chris. Sunrise Bait Co. or Ammerman. It's Amerman, I believe. Check those out, and there might be some others out there, but and Champ says, is the Feather River any good for steelhead fishing? Feather River here, tributary to the Sacramento in Northern California. Yes, it is. It's not right now because it looks like Ovaltine, but Feather River has I guess you'd call it a summer/fall run kind of thing. Steelhead they're not real big, maybe up to, I've seen them 11, 12 pounds, but most of them are going to be 8 pounds and under, and your average fish is probably, I don't know, 5 pounds, 6 pounds. Nice fish. Didn't have a massive run this year. Again, that's kind of been a drought deal. And the best time of year to fish those, again, is going to be August, September, October up in the Oroville area. So I know they were catching a bunch in Oroville before this rain, but now they're dumping a bunch of water out of Oroville Dam. So that's not happening anymore. So yes, the Feather River is good for steelhead fishing, not your classic coastal fishing. All our valley steelhead fishing in the Sacramento Valley, it's kind of not the same as the coast, but there are fish here. Okay, Chriso, do scents ever spook fish, i.e. bad bait or just a scent they are not in the mood for? Can you discuss if steelhead are typically leader shy? Also, techniques for positioning a drift boat for fly and spin fishing would be great. Okay, I better leave this up so I can remember all this. So do scents ever spook fish? I think if you're talking about, we had that one guy who's stinky, and he's apparently spooking fish. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure what you mean here as far as, like, I think of scents as commercial scents, like you can get the Atlas mics and the Pro Cure and all those sticky liquids and bait oils. I don't think those ever hurt anything. Some probably work better than others. As far as scents go, I think the best one I've ever had that you just squeeze on a yarn ball or a plastic worm or something is the Atlas Mike shrimp, the pink gooey sauce. You smother that on, and it seems to be, in fact, here's where I learned this. And again, this is small sample size, but these little things kind of stick in your brain. We were up at the Mad River Hatchery one year, and the river was, I don't know, I can't remember if it was blown. I guess it wasn't blown out, but it wasn't fishing very good. So we were sitting looking at the fish in the raceway, these big steelhead that had come in, and we were throwing something in the pond. I can't remember what it was, like cotton balls or something, being mischiefs in college. But we would squirt. We did a taste test. So we're like, okay, we'll throw this one in. This one had the Potskis, and they'd go, yeah, not really. No, this one has a Pro Cure. Yeah, they kind of like that. And then the one with the Atlas Mike's pink shrimp sauce on it, they love. So I've always had that back in my mind. But as far as scents go that aren't like commercial scents that you put on lures, like I was saying before, aftershave, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, gasoline, Flaming Hot Cheetos, you know, that kind of stuff. If you get that kind of stuff on your hands, it's best to buy one of those just soaps that neutralize the scent, or wear the rubber gloves, and then you don't have to worry about it. So hopefully that answers that part of it, Chris O. Steelhead, are they typically leader shy? In clear water, yes, they can be. If you have just a foot or two of visibility, I wouldn't worry too much about it, but in clear water for sure. So that's when you want to go make leaders longer, make them lighter, maybe go fluorocarbon depending on what you're doing. You definitely want to make them not associate the line to the bait. So yes, I guess the answer would be yes, they can be very leader shy in clear water. And then techniques for positioning a boat for fly and spin fishing for steelies from Chris O. You know, that depends on what you're doing, of course. Typically, we're going to put the boat, when pulling plugs, we're going to have the boat upstream, and you let your lures down below you, and then you just slowly work your way back. If we're side drifting, we want the boat, as the name suggests, off to the side, or bobber fishing, and we're going to cast out. You know, you get the boat away from where the fish are, and you cast out perpendicular to the boat and drift along with your stuff. So the baits go through the fish and the boat doesn't go over them. And with the fly fishing, the same thing. If you're moving and fishing out of a boat while fly fishing, you must be indicator fishing, which is basically like bobber fishing or side drifting. So yeah, you want to be off to the side. So hopefully that kind of answers that. And then Chris also asks, any tricks for keeping your hands dry and warm? Well, don't go fishing in the winter, but that's not an option. Rowing the boat, if you're the guy rowing the boat, your hands will stay nice and warm. Rubber gloves though, I don't use rubber. I use the name escapes me right now. What are they called? They're the new thing, the rubber. They used to be latex, but now they're oh god, I wear them every day and I can't think of the name. But just rubber gloves. Just they're not actually latex anymore. It'll come to me, but yeah, if you wear gloves, it's amazing. Just the little 3 mil or whatever rubber gloves will keep your hands warm, and you can get them tight enough to where you can still tie stuff. And it's an added bonus that if you're using bait, you're not getting goo all over yourself. I mean, it's not like having big, you know, polar mittens on, but it sure helps, especially if it's raining. Your hands stay dry and a little bit warmer. And I also have guys who I just saw them online somewhere that are wearing these battery operated gloves. My problem with all that stuff is, besides the little rubber glove things, is it's just too hard to do all the stuff I need to do, cast and bait and tie and all that stuff with anything but just the latex gloves on, or whatever they're called, which is driving me crazy. I can't think of right now, even though I have 50 boxes in my garage. Okay, from Night Boy, he took a 45-year break from all fishing. What? Why would you do such a thing? Began fishing again in October 2015. Good. Went out 45 times in the last 15 months. Awesome. Mostly fishing, some catching. Yeah, well, welcome to the club. Bought a little 12-foot aluminum boat with a 15-horse Merc. I'm a bit afraid of taking it on the Sac or American rivers because it's not a big boat and the motor is small. Too small for the river, always wanting to learn. No, it's not too small for the Sac. Here locally in town, the Sacramento River's deep, and it's you got no problems. I mean, don't go out on a crummy day, but that's fine. Now, the American River, I will tell you, is a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit from top to bottom, and there's times of the year where it's completely closed to all motors. And I wouldn't take a prop up that river. You're gonna lose your prop pretty quick. But if you just launch at, say, like Discovery Park and fish up and down, it's not real good steelhead fishing in there, but you can catch stripers and salmon and that kind of stuff in there. So yeah, take that boat out and go fishing. Welcome back to the club after 45 years. Randy says, have you ever fished the eastern tributaries of the U.S., Steelhead Alley to be more specific? You know, Randy, I have not, and it's bumming me out. Again, I was telling you, I write for Salmon Trout Steelheader magazine, and they have acquired Great Lakes Angler magazine. And Nick Amato, the guy I was talking about earlier, who turned me on to the whole jig and bobber thing, I keep saying, hey, dude, when are we going out there? I mean, I have been to Michigan and Wisconsin and did a little fishing, but no salmon and steelhead fishing. I was there at the wrong time, and some of those tributaries sound amazing. What's really cool is times of year, and depends on the place you're fishing, but you can have in the same time steelhead, salmon, lake trout. What else is in there? Well, they'll have kings and cohos, some Mackinaw, browns. I mean, just some cool variety. So I definitely want to go do that. So the answer is no, I haven't done it yet, but seems like I'm too busy guiding. I don't get to go fishing that much anymore. Okay, yarn balls. How do you rig those? Comes from Phil in Washington. Do you fish them like beads? You can fish yarn balls, and I wish I had some right here. I should have brought some into the room. But yarn ball, I'm going to fish. Let's see, I have a coin here. I don't. Usually, yarn ball that I'm going to fish is going to be, you know, size of a nickel, maybe nickel to a quarter, and I tie them, and maybe I'll do this in a future webinar. I'll show you how to tie these things. You could go again to my website, Fish with JD, and somewhere on there, I think if you look under techniques and go down to steelhead, I think I have it's been a while, but I believe I have a whole section on how to tie those. But it's really easy, and I tie them. Some guys tie them into the leader, or so they're, you know, the hook, the leader, and the yarn ball are all one unit. I like to tie them just the yarn ball by itself, and that way I can kind of rig it however I want. But the easiest way is you just take the egg loop on your octopus hook, you pull where you normally put the rope, put your yarn ball in there, cinch it down, and you can fish that with drift gear, or you can fish under a float. So again, yeah, that'll be a good one. We'll do this again, and I'll get more into that. Let's see, a couple more here. Phil in Washington says, nitrile gloves. Thank you. Gosh dang, it was driving me crazy. Nitrile. I bought like $100,000 worth of those things over the years. And he also says, regarding removing smells, up here in Washington, lemon fresh joy is touted as the cure for removing odors that may turn fish off. And you know what? That is something I use a lot. I always have a bottle of lemon joy, not lemon ultra. I'm not sure why, but lemon joy. Or I also use the Ajax stuff. The Ajax lemon dish soap from the dollar store seems to work, and we're probably overthinking this. But at the end of the day, like when we're salmon fishing, you can just wash your hands in it. Like if you just ate like I have guys who bring like, you know, Subway sandwiches that they grabbed on the way to the river, and they eat them out there, and then you see the big onion fall out, and you're like, oh God, that onion's on your hand, and now it's going to be on whatever you touch, on my lures, on my rods. And fish don't seem to like onion a whole lot. I like it, but raw onion is a very distinct smell. So I'll keep some lemon fresh joy, and if I don't have that other stuff, and just have them wash their hands periodically. And funny story, I had some guys who were salmon fishing. I used to be really anal about this. Like when guys get in my boat, before they touch anything, here's the lemon fresh joy, and I've kind of loosened up with that over the years. If you got something that really, like a big onion or whatever, you've been dip and chew or whatever, I make you do it. But I used to do it for everybody who got on the boat. And I remember it was in the dark one morning, and I handed the bottle up, and these guys had all fished with me except one guy. So they all knew what to do. They just, I look over, the one guy's doing this with the lemon fresh joy. He thought it was bug spray, which we got a good laugh at him. But by the way, bug spray is another one. So like if you're up in Alaska or somewhere and you just deed it up, good idea to get that stuff off your hands. So yeah, the lemon fresh joy works. And then like when we're salmon fishing, this is kind of an aside, but at the end of the day, you know, we're using the sardine wrap on the bottom of the plug. At the end of the day, I'll cut the sardine off, and then I'll scrub these plugs with lemon fresh joy and a little soft plastic scrub brush. And then also any lure, like sometimes when I'm using little steelhead plugs, I'll put some of that like Atlas Mike's shrimp sauce on there, and it's kind of sticky. So at the end of the day, I'll use that joy to get that off. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I failed to mention that. Okay, let's see. Alfie, hey Alfie. I think I know which Alfie that is. Says, looking forward to seeing you at the IC show. What are your times and dates? I'll be doing striper seminars at the Sacramento ISC show on Thursday. I think it is I don't have a calendar right here. I think it's January 19th, Thursday, striper seminar. I'll do that at noon, I believe. And then I have one Saturday the 21st, and I think that one's at 2 p.m. So that'll be light tackle striper stuff. So hopefully see you guys out there. Thanks for bringing that up, Alfie. Anonymous asked, what was my most memorable steelhead? And well, it used to be that one behind me who doesn't look that big from here, but that was my first 20-pounder. I like to be able to say my first because that implies I've caught more, which I have. I've caught 2 now. That one was a good one. I mean, memorable just because it's huge. I caught an even bigger one last winter, and I hate to say it, neither one of those were like super memorable. This one was cool because he was up in British Columbia in this just amazing river. It was snowing and these beautiful peaks and everywhere, but it wasn't like it was the most crazy steelhead I ever hooked. I tell you, here's my most memorable one. And we're going to go long here. I hope you guys don't mind. We're past the cutoff time, but who cares? My most memorable one was on the American River about 6 years ago now. And I had been guiding every day in December, and we were catching the American River fall run egg eater steelhead, we call them. And they are, again, they're these little guys. They're 3 to 5 pounds, that kind of thing. And we're doing pretty good. I was taking people out. We're catching several a day. And then my buddy Riley calls and says, it was just before Christmas. He says, hey man, I got a kitchen pass. Let's go steelhead fishing. I said, all right, let's do it. And we hadn't seen each other for a while, so we're like, okay, let's just go hang out. It's always fun to, for me anymore, it's more about just the getting out and hanging with the homies than anything else. So, but I said, well, I've been catching them down here in this stretch down lower and the drift boat. And we thought, let's not take the drift boat. That's too much work, too much like work. And let's just go off the bank. So we threw our waders on, and I had, those fish were small. They're only like 6-pound maximum size. So I was using a little 8-pound leader or whatever and drifting fish pill and a little chunks of roe or night crawlers. I can't even remember. And with a slinky just bouncing the bottom. Ding, 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 ding. And I hooked this fish, and we both look at it because Riley, we were just walking downstream to the next hole. In fact, I remember him going, why are you even fishing here? I was like, I don't know, just woo, there's one. So I hooked this fish, and it came to the surface, and it was a nice fish. The American in the fall has these, like, again, these little egg eaters, but in the winter we've got eel river strain fish, hatchery fish that come up, and those things can be in the mid-teens. So this was an early eel river winter run fish that was probably, I don't know, 7 pounds. Nice chrome fish. Comes to the surface, and it's fighting. And I'm like, right on. And Riley and I were both looking right at it when it came up. He's like, dude, nice winter run. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. So we were in a fast riffle, and it starts taking off. And I'm like, cool, whatever. So I start chasing it downstream, and it goes through this riffle and into this deep hole. Then my rod just goes, blah. I'm like, well, okay, what's the story here? And I go, dude, I'm snagged. And I'm sitting there and like, it's kind of processing. And I think, wait a minute, I've drifted like 300 baits through there in the last month out of the drift boat. There is no snag in there. And just about the time we both came to that epiphany, because he's fished that area a lot too, my snag started going. I'm like, my steelhead just grew. And so anyway, the short version is I fought this thing for, I don't know, it was probably close to a half hour. And it would get close, and then it would just start to, like, it was staying in the hole, which was cool. And one time I had such light line and such a right rod, I just kind of taking it easy and just a little bit and just easing it. Then it goes and go back out to the hole. And then it wasn't really going downstream. It was going back and forth like it didn't want to leave the hole, which was cool. Because we, at that point, were at the bottom end of an island, and one side was complete trees and stuff, so there's no way I was going to be able to follow. The other side was, it was pretty wide and fast, but I eventually decided I'm going to lose this fish. He's going to get into this current and just disappear, and I'm not going to be able to follow him. So I tried to go across, and I got right above him, and then I had that sickening feeling where the rod goes blink, and it just came off. The steelhead was gone, the hook was there, everything was there, and the only thing it could have been was a massive striper. Now, imagine the size of a striper that could eat a 7-pound steelhead. Just just kind of put that in your brain for a while. That's one of those fish that I didn't care if I caught it. I just wanted to see it. I mean, I would have really liked to get a picture of it. And one time it actually got up to right where the slinky's coming out of the water. I'm like, oh man, we're going to see this thing. We're going to, and then I just never could get it up. I just didn't have enough gusto in my rod to and the leader to put much pressure on it. So I tried that thing getting across, and then I ended up straight above it, and I think it just spit it out. Now I didn't get my steelhead back either. That's the bummer thing. But anyway, I would have liked to have seen that massive striper. So that was kind of a steelhead striper, my favorite combo. Okay, let's see. We got a few more. Let's see. Anonymous says, I didn't see how the rubber band holds onto the line allowing the bobber to stay in place. Okay. So let me get that bobber. What do I do with it? Oh, there's I don't have any line right here. It'd be better. So, okay, see this little cap here? That's just a little rubber band thing, right? So you run your line through this guy. And so at this point, let's just say your line would be going through this and down, and then you just put that guy back on. So now your line is running between the rubber band and the float. And then again, this one's missing it, but there'd be another one of those little rubber grommets there, and you run your line through that. So then it's lines coming here and then here. So hopefully that answers that question. We'll probably do many more of these, so we'll do a bobber only one. Okay, what else we got here? Let's see. Will all this help? Oh, will all this water help or hurt the winter run? That's a good question. I think water is a good thing all up and down the coast, especially here in California, where we've had just a complete drought, where everything's been hot and stagnant and weedy and just crappy. So big water will tend to scour out reds and do some damage for sure. But I think in the big picture, having water is a very good thing, especially here in the drought zone, the desert of California. But rivers are supposed to flood. Like, we forget about that, especially down here in the Central Valley, where most of our rivers are controlled by dams. You go to the coast and rivers flood every year, and they change. Like I was telling you about my buddy who was on the Hoe last week, and there were logs everywhere that weren't there before the last storm. Rivers are supposed to change. So this is like it's kind of like, you know how they say forest fires technically are really good for the forest. It rejuvenates. Flood does the same thing. It's going to move some gravel around and change stuff and hopefully be good. Let's see. Anonymous says, thanks for the great info for everyone on here. The Ultimate Guide to Steelhead Bank Fishing has a lot of good info as well, which is, yes, that's an ebook of mine, which you can get on Amazon. And then, let's see. Do you think this water will help future runs like 3 years from now? I think so. I mean, hopefully we don't get depends on how the spawn does. I mean, you can get all the reds washed out in high water, but I think we're going to be good. And then let's see, we got one Facebook question here. Let me answer that. I don't see where that is. I lost it. Oh, well. Well, okay, we're running long. I certainly appreciate you guys all coming. We got a Steelhead course coming soon. I'll keep you guys apprised of that whole thing, but it's a 6-hour course that, oh, wait, here's another question. Sorry. It's a 6-hour course on how to steelhead fish, basically from the bank, everything you need to know, and I'll announce more as that comes out, but it'll be cool. It's the thing I wish I'd always had as a beginning steelhead fisherman. It just kind of holds your hand and shows you everything that you've really wondered. And 6 hours of video of my smiling face. But doing everything from plunking to bobber fishing, drift fishing, curing bait, storing bait, yarn balls, making spawn sacks, all kinds of good stuff. So anyway, and here's another one from Facebook. This is what type of braided line do you run for steelies, and what leader do you use? Well, that, of course, is a kind of a case-by-case basis, but generally I like 30-pound braid. It's small diameter. You can cast it a mile, and I've been using P-line lately, P-line's braid, but I think a lot of the braids are getting pretty similar as far as the quality level. And then a leader, if I'm bobber fishing, I usually use fluorocarbon because it sinks. When I'm drift fishing, I like to have my bait up a little bit off the bottom, and with the bobber fishing, it's all suspended underneath, so you're not worried about anything floating. So I'll use the fluorocarbon because it sinks. Mono floats, so I'll use a mono leader when drift fishing and that kind of stuff. And typically 8 to 10 pounds. Sometimes if you're on bigger waters, I've gone 12, and in BC we've gone to 17 pounds. So all kinds of it's a case by case. It depends on what you're using, how big the fish are, but you know, the 8 to 12 pound is kind of your standard steelhead leader. And let's see, any more? I think that's about it. Oh wait, here we go. So parallels and outside in the float. Yes, that was regards to the float. Getting back to that real quick, just the line's going through there and through the grommet that's not here. This is a fixed float. This is the kind that just attaches to your line and then you grab it like this and slide up and down. You also have slider floats where that have a hole through the middle and you run the line actually through the bobber. And that's the one where you have to have a bobber stop up on top. And again, I'll do another one of these soon, and we'll get into more of that. And just be sure to check your email. We'll get more questions from you guys. Really appreciate you guys coming out, and stay dry. Hopefully we get some clear water. I mean, I'm not complaining. You can't complain about water, especially in this day. We've needed it for so long, but hopefully it does get fishable sometime because I'm going a little crazy. So anyway, I guess that's it. Thanks for showing up. Hopefully we'll do another one of these really soon, and be good. We'll catch you later. Thanks.